Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Truly Myrtle podcast. I'm Libby, and this is our summer yarn series. I've been having a series of interviews throughout the summer with fabulous people in the yarn world. And today I am thrilled to bring you Bonnie from Union Fibre. She is one of my very favorite dyers, and she's going to talk to us all about yarn. And I want to hear from her. We're going to talk about knitting yarn, spinning yarn, and dyeing yarn. And I'm curious to hear from Bonnie whether those worlds collide for her or whether she has different preferences for what she does. So welcome, Bonnie. It is lovely to have you here.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
Tell us a little bit about Union Fibre before we start. So just to people that don't know you, tell us a little bit about Union Fibre and you.
Union Fibre is it's a solo, just me business. I dye out of my garage. I dye mostly knitting yarn, but also quite a bit of spinning fiber these days. And I'm probably a bit unconventional in the way that I run my business compared to other dyers. So I see it more as an art practice rather than a business of churning out, yarn. I think when I started, there was definitely a lot more production, but I tend to like the creative play and sort of going through ideas and different things that are, just expression through yarn, I guess. That's what I love. People probably aren't even aware of that when I'm doing it, but even the way I name certain colorways, there's something there. There's always something that I'm playing with. So.
Brilliant. And you've got a Canadian accent, but you're actually based here in New Zealand with me, although not right near me, but you're based here in New Zealand. You've been here for ages.
Yeah. Coming up 18 years next year. So, and I've been running Union Fibre. I started it up, must be 6 years ago. Might even be 7 next year. I think it was 2018. So I think it's 7 years next year. Yeah.
That's flown, hasn't it?
It has flown. Yeah. And the business has evolved over the years as, family needs have sort of changed, and my own kind of, I love running a business because of the, what's the word? Like control, I guess I have over
autonomy,
how I can change and shift. Yeah. The autonomy and being able to shift and change as I need to and want to. And so I really, really enjoy it. I don't mind that I run it unconventionally, No,
it's good. I think it speaks to who you are. And I think there's actually, I don't know, there's something about just doing you, be you. So I try and tell people, just be you, because I think that's the only thing you can be. And it pays off in the long run. Okay. So talk to us a little bit about, you and I have had conversations about this before, but this idea of coming into yarn dyeing as a knitter and then more recently as a spinner. You weren't always a spinner, were you? So just talk to me about kind of the evolution of fibre in your life. And I'm really curious to hear about the kind of things that you dye on versus the things you like to knit versus the things you like to spin.
Yeah. I think I had started spinning before I became a dyer, but I didn't really delve into it until after becoming a dyer. So I didn't have enough experience spinning to really understand the construction of yarn. So when I started dyeing, I was really just interested in the color and the way that different yarns took up the color. And without understanding a lot of the kind of chemistry and just why certain yarns took color more. It was sort of a process of trying to figure that out. And so I found that I loved dyeing different yarns for different reasons. Like I think when people get into knitting, they might not have as much awareness that, like, what's a superwash yarn versus a non-superwash yarn? What's a woolen spun versus a worsted spun? And as a dyer, it makes a huge difference what techniques you use depending on what type of yarn you're using, or the way the fibers are processed, prior to being spun. So like a superwash yarn dyes really, really beautifully. And I found that I love dyeing superwash yarns. Interestingly, I don't love knitting with superwash yarns. So that felt a little bit like a strange thing to be dyeing yarns that I loved the way I can manipulate a superwash yarn, the way the colors layer and glaze. You can get such detail and with the speckling and just with like, it's like oil painting. I find with superwash yarn where you can add thin layers of dye to get like really complex, deep colors. And it's not that I don't enjoy superwash yarn in some things. I think there's a really great application for them. Like sometimes I love knitting shawls in it, and it can be like really drapey. It means you can sort of be a bit more, you can wash it more easily and that kind of a thing. And baby clothes are just amazing with superwash for being able to just chuck them in the washing machine. And if they get thrown in the dryer, it's not actually going to shrink the wool. So I think there's definitely an application in terms of knitting with it, and I do like it. But I love knitting with non-superwash yarns. So I like the tactileness of I like the way the fibers kind of cling together a little bit more. So there's a bit more structure in certain things. I like it can look a little bit more rustic. Although that's not always the case, depending on what preparation the yarn is, like a worsted versus a woolen spun. So where the fibers are all aligned, like in a worsted, you get a nice, sleek, drapey, smooth yarn, or a woolen spun where they're all kind of, like that. And you get a lofty yarn. For people who might not know, the difference is it's like Brooklyn tweed. If anybody's familiar with Brooklyn tweed, loft or shelter, that's a woolen spun, versus like a lot of the indie dyed yarns that are like have those speckled looks and the glazed looks. Those are going to be a worsted spun superwash yarn.
I heard someone describe the difference, which I thought was quite a good visual. Is a woolen spun is an English tweed suit, and a worsted spun is an Italian fine business suit, and
totally
that gives us the visual of how different they look when we're putting them on. I thought that was a good one.
And if you want to see how they dye, a good example of a superwash versus a non-superwash is, imagine taking dye and you've got a white plastic plate, and you've got a white piece of paper towel. They're next to each other. If you take the dye and you drip it on the plate and you drip it over, those will just puddle and pool and stick clear, bright color. If you drop those onto a paper towel, that's your non-superwash. It's going to diffuse. The color looks not as bright. And so that's kind of why I love the application on a superwash yarn, because those speckles are going to stay where you put them. They're going to have defined edges, to the dye, more so than with a non-superwash yarn. And also you can bring them in and out of a hot dye pot. This is what I look like when I'm dyeing. In and out of the dye pot, layers and layers.
Yeah.
And you can layer the colors, and it's just like these clear sort of layers versus a non-superwash, which you cannot lift in and out. Like, don't touch it, don't agitate it, it will felt. And so you can still layer colors, but there's a different method to it, and you're not going to get that crisp sort of just like glazing effect. It's going to be more of like it's just more subtle. It's not defined. The colors are more muted. It's different. It takes way more dye. So non-superwash yarns take way more dye. Yeah, way more dye to get the same. It's like at least twice as much. Yeah.
Right.
But in saying that too, so it's so much fun having lots of different types of yarn, like mohair silk, alpaca. It's just, I enjoy the challenge of learning how to get the desired effect on different yarns. So for anybody who's into astrology, I'm a Virgo rising, so I like obsessing and getting to the fine details of how to do everything. So
Oh, that's interesting. So are you finding yourself straying more towards dyeing more non-superwash yarns, or are you still kind of straddling both?
Oh, I still love both. I would say that I've picked up more non-superwash over the years, because I learned that as I became more skilled at knitting and knitted more, that the garments that I was knitting out of non-superwash yarn, I enjoyed more.
Right.
That being said, it was the type of like a big sweaters, things that are big that might be seamless. I much prefer a non-superwash yarn, because it's going to help that structure a bit, especially like a woolen spun that's lighter and loftier. If I'm using a superwash yarn for a big jumper with no seams, it sags, they hang, especially after blocking or washing. The superwash has had all its scales removed and had a polymer put over the fibers before it's spun, and so it loses all of its tacky stickability. So you're going to find that the yarns are going to drape and hang. And sometimes, unfortunately, it can mean sagging if the garment's large and um, and there's a lot of weight. You can get sort of a loss of structure. So I would say that over the years of knitting garments and enjoying garments that had lots of ease, that I wasn't getting the look that I wanted with a superwash necessarily, as much as just using a non-superwash yarn. But there's also tactics on, if you love the look of superwash yarns and you want to knit, jumpers with ease, or large like accessories and that kind of a thing, you can add in a fluff. So you can make a superwash yarn and you can add in like a mohair silk fluff or a Surrey silk fluff. And that, when you combine those together, if anybody's done that, you might notice that there's suddenly a lot less yarn that you need in a garment, which means it's going to weigh less, but also the air that the fluff adds in, and the tackiness of a non-superwash fluff, it just adds the structure. So that can be a great way of wanting the colors and speckles from a superwash, even though the mohair silk isn't, but it dyes, it holds color kind of almost like a superwash. It's really gets nice, potent little speckles and
do you
stuff.
think
So
that's the silk component or the mohair component of that seems
mohair?
To like
okay, both. So if anybody's ever dyed or knit with like the same colorway, if you see it on mohair silk fluff versus Surrey alpaca, I'm going like, which way do I have to go to come into? I'm so backwards. A person will notice that there's more of a muted tone to the alpaca. Mohair, the quality of the fiber is lustrous. It's really shiny, and it just has, for some reason, it dyes really well. So it dyes almost as well as a superwash yarn. It takes color like beautifully. So
I think it's got something to do with
silk.
the scales. I feel like it's got something to do with the scales or the number or the density of the scales or something like that.
Well, another yarn that takes color really nice, fiber, is Masham. If anybody's ever, or tea swatter, like long, lustrous, the lustrous fibers tend to, just the color shows up on them better. So I don't know I actually don't know the physiology behind what makes a fiber lustrous. So I'm going to need to go and look at why some of them, must be the way their scales are, partly, but also I don't know if they have more. Anyway, I'm going to get all nerdy if I go into that, but all that to say that, I love non-superwash for its structure and the feel and the types of sheep as well. So this is the thing, is like knitting is the best rabbit hole because it can be anything you want it to be. You can be someone who doesn't care about the breeds of the sheep, or you can be someone who like goes and wants to knit like this jumper I'm going to knit out of a blue-faced Leicester, and this one I want to knit like a Suffolk, or this one I want to knit like some socks out of Cheviot, So you can get into that. And that's where spinning came in for me, was just a sort of obsession with wanting to learn all the different types of characteristics between fiber. And I think spinning is one of the best ways to understand different fiber types and different constructions of yarn. So you start to understand, like, is it an S twist or is it a Z twist? Like for a lot of people, they might be like, what are you talking about? But it makes a difference. And a lot of yarns are going to be S twist for knitting. For crochet, a Z twist is really good, apparently. So there's this, it's great because you can nerd out on it as much or as little as you want. So long as you're getting the end result that you want, and so I came into spinning partly because I wanted to try another dye application. I was seeing all this beautiful fiber. I had lots of friends who were spinning, and they, were sort of encouraging me to, like, why don't you try dyeing some fiber? And I was like, okay. And I just love the way fiber looks when it's dyed, the way you can apply. It's got a messiness that I like. My dye style is, I do write meticulous recipes sometimes. But sometimes I just love getting into the dye pots. Like if I were a painter, I'd paint with my hands.
I do.
Yeah. I love,
I get that.
Yeah. My description of me as a child was feral. So I'm just a little bit, I just like getting into it and being sort of immersed in what it is that I'm doing. And you can see I'm always using my hands. I'm really tactile.
Mm.
And that's maybe why I loved spinning as well, because you got to feel all the different types of fiber as
Mm.
you're drafting. You can feel the different types of preparation. If it's carded, is it combed? Is it a Rolag?
Mm.
Is it, you know? So again, there's all these rabbit holes you can go down into. And overall, I think it was just that I loved seeing this fluff arrive and putting it into a dye pot and just watching it transform with color. And what's fun about dyeing fiber in the way that I do kettle dye. So for anybody, some people do it in like pans and they'll
Mm.
do like shallow immersion. I do a not too shallow immersion. So I have like water and put the fiber in. There's still room for the fiber to move around. And then other people do hand painting where they put the damp fiber on a table and actually like paint the yarn, apply dye. So I like putting mine into a pot so I can just pour dye over and just watch it kind of change. And, yeah. So it's just, I think it's just a deep curiosity. I just love color. I love different, and so I just wanted to just experiment and play. And I think by doing that, and not everybody's like this. Some people don't like to sort of just dive in and try all these different things. It can be really intimidating. But for me, that's the way I operate. I want to just try all these different things. And then through that, I can sort of feel what feels like the right direction to go in. And I just like, it's like I love the tactileness, the sensory sort of parts of knitting and dyeing and all that. It's a real sensory experience for me. So
that all ties into whether or not you've got things that you'll notice. You'll particularly be aware of the superwash versus non-superwash and the particular variants of fibers that you're dealing with, because you're so tactile. And so when you come to doing the dyeing the fiber, you'll have that same kind of thing going on, because you can presumably access superwash fiber and you can access non-superwash fiber, and then a plethora of different fibers. But how easy is it to get exactly what you want to put in the pots? Like, do you have to hunt out these things?
Oh, like to find the fiber, or like
to
there's
find the
definitely
specific.
sourcing.
Yeah,
It's playing around and experimenting. I mean, going to Fiber Fests was like before Capital Fiber Fest was Capital Fiber Fest. It used to be Upper Hut Spinners and Weavers, and they had their awesome little, it would be like in a hall, and there'd be all these people from around the country who would come with mostly, like, there was definitely dyed fiber, but there was so much rare breed sheep fiber, and so that was such a great way to sort of like develop an awareness of what types of fibers I liked the look of. Because again, it's a tactile thing. I just love going and shoving my hand in bags of fiber, and so I would say I had to sort of, because it's an investment too, right? You don't want to just go buy like 5 kilograms of a fiber and then go, I hate this, or I don't like the way it dyes, or because superwash dyes so differently to non-superwash fiber, and Borodale, dyes so differently to like a different type of, I mean, even merino, and so I would say like a lot of it was just going and finding little bags of fiber that I would try out, and just dye a little bit, like 50 grams or whatever, and see what I liked the color of, how did it dye. And it's a big learning experience, learning how to knot felt fiber, and it's pretty, it can be intimidating, I think.
Absolutely. I think so. And so tell me about some of the differences between some of the fibers, like what in terms of, you were talking before about the superwash taking color and the non-superwash taking color. Do you see that? And you also talked about the alpaca versus the silk mohair, but do you see that much within the kind of little, sort of, you've said a merino and Corriedale, how do they take fiber differently? And, what are you kind of finding yourself drawn to?
Yeah. So because fibers are, like, let's say you've got, I never know how to say this sheep breed. Is it Rambouillet? Rambouillet. I want to say Rambouillet because of the French double L, but maybe it's Rambouillet. So if you have Rambouillet versus merino, they can actually be very similar in like their fine micronness and crimp, but Rambouillet is a matte fiber. It doesn't have the sheen of merino, for example. So like if I dyed that one next to the other, the Rambouillet is going to look more matte, less shiny. And then, of course, it's different too. Like each farm is going to be producing its own so like no two merino sheep farms are going to be producing the same merino. So that's where it starts to get a little bit pedantic. But overall, I would just say that like when I really learned what fibers I loved, it was by spinning them. It was like, again, it's an embodied experience. It's spinning them, it's feeling them go through the fingers. And I learned very quickly that I hated spinning merino. The short staple length, I don't mind it now that I'm more experienced, but it was the worst fiber to learn on. And there was a really lovely dyer who doesn't dye anymore. And she heard me struggling with it because I was asking her questions, and she was so generous. And she sent me, I think it was Corriedale, and which is a much longer staple, and it was so much easier to learn on. And because I nearly gave up with the merino.
I know.
Well, it was also not prepared very well. It was just matted and was like the antithesis of a great spinning experience. So for a beginner, it was like, why do people torture themselves doing this? Being so sensory too. I was like, oh. Anyway, so I really think my friend always tells me that I have to, in slightly more crass terms, I'll make it PC on here, but she says I have to muck around and find out. So anyway, that's like, for some people, that's the key, is just like you have to get in there and just try it out. And and there can be some really great swaps that you can do with people. If someone has like 400 grams of a Suffolk and you've always wanted to try Suffolk or Shetland or something like that, like do some swaps. My friend and I do fiber swaps all the time from our rather decadent stashes. That's the thing. Warning, be warned if you get into spinning. It's just one more thing that you're going to get obsessed with. So, but my house has great insulation. It's like, it's good. It's dual purpose. So ceilings got lots of insulation. But it's, I would just say that it really, like, that's the one thing, is like, just muck around and find out, like, try it out, experiment. Don't be afraid to try things. And also, if you hate it, like, that's okay. It's just not your thing. Move on to something else. You'll find something that you just go, oh, I love this. Like, if anybody's ever spun Hanui, best fiber ever. Like,
how similar is that to Corriedale? I feel like it's kind of.
It's well, I would say in ease of spinning, it is, but it's like merino with like a Romney crimp and the staple length and sheen of Romney. Like, it's the perfect combination. So I love Romney. I love the length of it. I love the crimp. I love the sheen. See, here I am spinning. I'm like imagining myself drafting it as I'm like doing it. And merino, I love the crimp. So it's like Hanui has the merino crimp mixed with a Romney crimp. It's like a match made in heaven to me. So you still get a really crimpy, bouncy fiber like merino, but you've got this other. It's like, if you haven't tried it, you have to try it. It's a rare breed.
I've got some of yours here. I'm sure I have. I haven't done it yet.
I love it. And the ease of spinning. I think what Harriet was saying that her mom really wanted was to have merino, fineness of merino with the ease of spinning of Romney. And that's like exactly what they got. It's long staple. It's lustrous. It's crimpy. It's bouncy. It's so lovely, but you can get anywhere from like a fine merino, like sort of micron, up to like a more medium micron or stronger, so they just do such a lovely job farming, like really responsibly, and their sheep are really well cared for, which you can see in the quality of their fibers. So I'm just pumping them right now because they're my favorite.
So is this only a New Zealand thing though, Hanui? I mean, it sounds like
they're the only ones who do it. They created the breed over like 30 years or something like that. So it's a rare breed.
Okay. Yes. So they got a little bit of the Romney and they got a little bit of the merino, and this is how they created this Hanui.
And then very carefully over years, they picked the best of the best and then would breed them so that they would get the fiber type that they want. So, and it's so nice for dyeing. Like, because it doesn't felt like merino. So I find that it's more forgiving than merino. It dyes beautifully. The luster on it is great. It's just kind of like and I was the biggest fan of Anna Grattan's Corriedale before. So I got a little notification. Hers is the best. It's best Corriedale because it's a like you can get down to like 24 micron, which is quite fine for a Corriedale. Normally it's above 30 micron, is kind of 30 and above. So I really like Anna Grattan Corriedale the best. And it's so easy to spin, and it's so lovely to wear, and it's got such a nice crimp on it. So Corriedale, I would say, if anybody's going to learn to dye and spin, like Corriedale would be my starting point, or Hanui if you can get a hold of Hanui. But of course, if you're starting out, you might want something that's just a little bit less expensive. Like the Hanui is not expensive by any means. It's more that sometimes you can get Corriedale for like quite a lot less, and to try it out, so that if you feel like you're going to ruin it or whatever, you're not sort of ruining,
and
$20 worth of fiber versus 5.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting, because a lot of these, we obviously hear about them a lot here in New Zealand, but for people, how much local yarn and local fiber are you using, and are you seeing as being
there's a trend here
option? Yeah.
There's a trend here. And
here
there's definitely a trend for people. I think it's global. That there seems to be a lot more people trying to find locally sourced yarns and fiber. And I think actually what is happening here too is that a lot of dyers sort of came onto the scene, like maybe 10 years ago. Like there was a big influx of dyers. Dyes became more available. There was just a surge. There was a demand for it, and there was people who were just like looking to maybe either change jobs, or they were mothers or parents, and they needed something that was going to provide them with a little bit of income, and so there was this big explosion of dyers. And what I think happened is that the superwash yarns were the main thing that people were doing, and so most people were buying all their yarn from like one main mill, and so they were using all the same bases. And so there's a little bit of a competitive aspect to that. You're using the same bases. So it's sort of like, well, whose colors do you like better? And as we are we're people with tastes and preferences, there's going to be certain dyers that really we gravitate towards, because there's something about the way they do colors that just feels like us, and so, but I think what happened to that is that over the years, and this is my experience, but I've witnessed it with or observed it, is that as we get more experienced as not only dyers, but knitters, spinners, and so many dyers have picked up spinning, we start to become aware of what's available around us, because you start searching for it, because you're like, oh, I want to try different stuff. I want to try different yarn. And there's something about the local thing that I think we're starting to feel more, that we want to be a bit more connected with local things, that we want to be supporting local farmers. We want to be supporting local industry, especially in New Zealand. There's like a dying wool industry sometimes, or it feels like there has been. And so there's a bit more of a push for people to want to source locally, and which I think is cool. It's really great.
And postage is out of control, expensive as well, especially when you're down here at this end of the world. To ship something in from overseas is expensive. So there's that, I think, too.
Yeah, exactly. But also I think there's one producer here, and I can't remember, Ethan put me on to them. And I really wish I remembered the name, but they produce the most stunning kid mohair in New Zealand, and they're getting yarns milled, and it is so beautiful. I bought some.
Ad Majora.
Yes.
I can't remember. I know, they're absolutely
Have you
lovely.
felt the yarn? Have you seen it?
I have seen it. I have felt it. I haven't got any in my stash though. Ad Majora. Yeah, and down in Christchurch. Beautiful. And such nice people. Absolutely lovely people.
Got a bag waiting for me to play with of some yarns to dye. So I'm really excited to see that, right? So there are actually, and the Silver Crest Farms, I think, does Polworth.
Yes.
Starcrest.
Yeah. Eleanor and Jack. Yeah.
And then the Hanui is amazing, Anna Grattan stuff, and I mean, Hanui does get some yarns milled as well. They might still have some available, but their yarns that they had milled were just sensationally beautiful. So you can, if you're sourcing.
So it's quite exciting.
It is exciting, and they're trying to sort of build up slowly more. They're really catering towards dyers, and that's exciting. So anyway, I love where the industry is at. I think there's been a lot of changes. People are adapting because again, these are all like mostly small businesses or medium-sized businesses, you know, and so it's exciting. It's exciting to see people's evolution, just like what I've been going through, where they're sort of finding the yarns that they love and the colors that they love, and the spinning. I'm so excited to see so many people spinning. It just
so many.
It's really cool. Yeah, because the possibilities are endless with knitting, with dyeing, with spinning, you know, like with designing. Like it's a really creative industry. And I'm so glad that I kind of stumbled into it. You know, I didn't ever anticipate sort of doing this for this long. I was like, you know, a isolated little lonely mom of kids. You know, we just moved out from the city out into the suburbs, and I was just lonely and I needed something to do. So I was like, I'm going to try dyeing yarn.
Yeah.
I
think a lot of people have fallen into kind of like that and not expected to stay in it for so long. But like you say, there are just all these rabbit holes. And once you get into it, I think it's such a beautiful balance between, you know, sort of that intellectual stimulation and that tactile stimulation and the satisfaction of having things that you finish. I love finishing. All of that stuff, creativity. It really is a.
And then if you just have a few friends who are into spinning or knitting or textiles, you know, like then it's like it just becomes this exciting little thing where like the joy I get from, you know, having one of my friends come over, and we don't see each other near enough anymore because we're both so busy, but when she comes over and she brings what she's been spinning or knitting, it's just like, and then I show her, we're having like this little show and tell, and it's just so exciting. So I love it.
Oh, that's really cool. So do you see yourself heading more in one direction than another? I mean, you've talked about local, and obviously there's a lot happening here in New Zealand locally that presumably will fill that cup for you. But do you see yourself moving away from some of the superwash, like you say, or you're going to keep some of that in your hand?
I still love superwash.
Yeah.
I still love superwash. There's so many applications for it. It dyes so beautifully. The company who supplies the superwash yarns are, you know, trying to farm things responsibly and do things responsibly, and they're really lovely and nice to deal with. So I feel like it's something that's still working really well, and that I haven't exhausted all my, you know, efforts on wanting to sort of explore. But I do love, I do love the non-superwash. I would like to explore that a little more. But to be honest, Libby, I want to get people into learning to do it themselves. So I started out Union Fibre teaching workshops, and there's something about watching people light up when they learn a new skill, and they go on that journey of like, they started down the rabbit hole, and I'm just like so excited.
Yeah, so exciting.
So I would say personally, I'll probably explore a lot more with actually the big thing that I want to do. This is more, I guess, because Union Fibre for me is so like it's always shifting and changing. Like when I say it's unconventional, like it really is. It's sort of like I'm not identified with it anymore. I think I was strongly identified with it as like it's a business, and I'm, you know, like gonna have my little enterprise. And I've come to be aware that for me, it's really an art practice. So it's something that changes and evolves. And the things that I've loved about it are the people, and being encouraged to learn skills, seeing what other people are doing is just so inspiring. And so I guess I'm at this funny place where I'd love to come back and be a bit more present, because I used to be really present, and then I just kind of hit it. I just had a few years of needing to kind of cocoon, and I feel like coming back and kind of like being a bit more present and really sharing what I'm doing more. Because I used to share what I was knitting, and I just haven't. I've hardly knit. I've hardly been doing anything knit. Like it's taken me a year to knit a cardigan, and it's taken me like 2 months to knit a sleeve and 3 weeks to knit a cuff. So but not to say that I'm not doing 1,000 other things. I'm
Mm,
always
mm,
have my hands in
I
like
know.
18 different pies,
Yeah.
but I've got a lot of Hanui raw fleeces. Probably shouldn't say that too loudly because like people want to get their hands on them, but I have quite a few
Oh, you
that
lucky
I've acquired, and I want to get into processing them and sharing that experience. So I guess with Union Fiber, like I'd like to get a bit more into like I don't know, just sharing things and then hearing people's journeys and sharing my own journey. And yeah, so I'll still dye yarn, I'll still dye fiber. It'll be a mix of superwash, non-superwash, different types of fiber and whatnot. So I guess I'm trying not to like pick one thing or the other. I just see all of them as being relevant in some way, and I love them all for different reasons. I think because I've come to understand the relevance of their applications in different areas. So, I think there was a time where I felt, oh, superwash yarns, like they must be so environmentally unfriendly, but like everything is relative, like if you're someone who's going to chuck a beautiful hand knit non-superwash jumper in the wash just after you've knit it and felt it, which like I've seen this happen so many times, then maybe the superwash would have been the better option because you'd have something that you could still wear.
Yeah. That's the ultimate in fast fashion. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Oh, so that sounds. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes for you. You'll have to come back and. I mean, obviously, you'll tell me anyway. But I'm really looking forward. to seeing
I won't be able to not tell you. I will apologize in advance because you're going to get all my voice messages on your phone.
I know. Yeah. It'll be good. I enjoy that. That's really good. Oh, wicked. All right. Well, everybody now watch this space. We'll see where Bonnie goes. It's going to be really exciting. And I just think that opens the door to people who are feeling really, I think this can be a lot of guilt about certain yarn choices. I just think do what works for you. I think there is a time and a space for lots of things. I really enjoy knitting with superwash for some things and non-superwash for other things. I just think it's a matter of being discerning for yourself about what you need in that moment.
And the key there is like exploring. You have to explore in order to know what you like. Otherwise, how are you to know? And you might see something. It's like this beautiful skeins of variegated yarn. Like I've dyed some that are like really stunning in the skein, but when I've gone to knit them up, I've been like, ah. But then there might be an application where I love it, like socks or So it's just you gotta in the non-crass terms, you gotta muck around and find out.
Gotta muck around with it. That's right. Exactly.
Muck around. There you go.
But I love it that it's this artistic practice for you. I think I can take a lot from that as well. I think that is a really good way when you feel like you're coming at this from a creative artistic background, then it's hard to hold on to that and remember that. But actually it is really important for so many of us, I think. That
just the play. We have to have the play and that joy and inspiration. Like that's the root. That's at the basis of what I do. It has to be fun. We have to get curious. Take away the guilt, the sort of ideals, like take away that stuff, like remove the identification from that stuff and just get curious and playful. And it's just like this wellspring of creativity comes out of that. And and what comes out of that too is you'll start finding your people who also are doing that. And then like, it's just endless fun.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us for our Summer of Yarn. That was really interesting. I think that will hopefully give people a lot of food for thought and let them go out and be creative, I say. So thank you, Bonnie. That was wicked. Watch this space, people. Watch this space. All right, everybody. We'll catch you later. Enjoy the Summer of Yarn and goodbye from us. See you later. Bye, Bonnie.